Hey everybody, it's Yoli Medina, and today I'm going to be talking about the Bryan Kohberger sentencing hearing, which was held last week on July 23rd. And this is the individual, Bryan Kohberger, who pled guilty to unaliving 4 students, Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. He unalived them in a house that was near the Idaho State University on November 13th, 2022 in the early morning hours. And his sentencing hearing was quite strange to me. Now, I didn't expect that the roommates would make an appearance or even give a statement, but I understand that the judge has deemed the roommates who were in the home when the unalivings occurred and did not call 911 for some hour, 8 hours after the unalivings. The judge has deemed them victims because they were there and they were subjected to, they were scared, they were subjected to what was going on, and for whatever reason they didn't call 911. They should have, but they didn't. But in any event, the judge has deemed them as victims. So Bethany Funk was one of the roommates, and she gave a statement via her friend, Emily Allant, I believe it was. And there was a written statement. And in that statement, Bethany Funk did address why she did not call, or why she called her father, because in the paperwork it was revealed that sometime in the early morning hours, Bethany Funk called her father. And apparently her father is a dentist. And so in her statement, she addressed that and said that the reason why she called her father was because she had a toothache. And her father told her to take an Advil and go to sleep. So that's what she did. And Dylan Mortensen was the other roommate who was in the home when the unalivings occurred. And as I said, the judge declared her as a victim. So she did come to the court and she gave her victim her victim impact statement. And she was emotional. And she didn't address the 8-hour delay, but she was really, really emotional. And when I say the 8-hour delay, that means the 8-hour delay in calling 911. But what I found strange was, and I guess I'm not totally understanding it, but she had special arrangements to come into the court to give her statement. And when Ashley Jennings asked the judge, we have special arrangements for Dylan Mortensen. And I thought, whoa, what does that mean? Is she coming in a wheelchair or what's the deal? So it was kind of stunned me. But they had her sit in Ashley Jennings' seat. That's the prosecutor, along with Bill Thompson. So she sat in Ashley Jennings' seat, and Ashley Jennings was on one side of her, and Bill Thompson was on the other side of her. And they both kind of leaned in, and Bill Thompson had his face facing her and forward. And Ashley Jennings kind of had the same posture. So that was strange to me. At first, I thought, boy, why are they doing that to her? But then I realized that the reason why Mr. Thompson was in that position was to block her from seeing Bryan Kohberger, because he was at the other end. But I can't be sure about that. But that's what I think that was. But it certainly looks strange to me, seeing her as she was crying and having 2 prosecutors on her. It seemed like they were on her. And maybe she requested that. I don't know. But that seemed a little strange. But at the end of the day, I think the prosecutor was trying to block Bryan Kohberger from seeing her, or her seeing Bryan Kohberger, or she seeing Bryan Kohberger. So that was that. And then when Mr. G came up, and that's Mr. Gonsalves, his daughter is Kaylee Gonsalves, and she was unalived in this awful crime. When he came up to the podium, oh boy, my heart was racing because he moved the podium. And I thought, oh my God, is he going to throw the podium at Bryan Kohberger? Oh, I was just, but he didn't. He just moved it so that he could be facing Bryan Kohberger. And that's when I realized that Bryan Kohberger is on that side, meaning the side that Mr. Goncalves was facing. And he was fine. But you're really not supposed to move you're supposed to address the court in a victim impact statement. So, but the court isn't going to do anything about that. I mean, this is their time, And if the court wanted to do something, he could have said, please address me, please don't move the podium. But he didn't do that. And this is such a strange case that I don't know, it was very strange. But Mr. Goncalves gave his statement and whatnot. And then the attorney for the Goncalves family came up and he read victims' statements from, I believe it's the grandparents of Kaylee, or grandparent. I can't remember right now. But one of the things I found strange about what Shannon Gray said was he mentioned you and your women attorneys. And it was kind of like, are they trying to bait him? Are they trying to bait Bryan Kohberger? Because that would be futile if they did. But because Bryan Kohberger, at least in the record, which is what I'm going on, the court record, he has been diagnosed with autism, OCD, and some motor coordination disorder. And he's not going to react the way somebody would when being talked to like that. So in any event, that was kind of strange to me. Then the prosecutor, after the victims' impact statements were done, the prosecutor got up, Mr. Thompson, and started talking about how the plea agreement came about. And I was thinking to myself, well, why is he doing that? It was almost like he was defending himself. And I guess he was doing that because there was so many people were so angry. They said, oh no, plea deal shouldn't be done. And Bryan Kohberger should be forced to tell what happened as a part of the plea deal. And yes, that could have been done, but it wasn't. But Bryan Kohberger also pled to no appeal. So in the bargaining process, perhaps Bryan Kohberger maybe wanted to take an offered plea, which is a plea where you say the evidence is enough to convict me, although I maintain my innocence. He did not take that plea. So in the negotiation process, he may have said, I don't want to say anything. And so, okay, then you don't have any rights to appeal and you plead guilty to everything and to life imprisonment. I mean, I don't know how those things work because I'm not a criminal defense attorney, but in any event, the prosecutor got up and was, to me, kind of defending what he did because I guess the public was critical of it and the families were. And then the other strange thing is that Bryan Kohberger's attorney, Elizabeth Massoff, I think, she's the dark-haired woman, and she was sitting next to Kohberger, and she had like this smile. It's just a fixed smile, which was odd. And I had to review the sentencing hearing several times, and it looked like she was smiling, but I think that's just her normal resting face. I mean, at least I hope. I think it was her normal resting face. I don't know, but Bryan Kohberger was just flat. And I know a lot of people in media and social media, they say he's a psychopath and they think he wants attention. But it's pretty, I mean, I'm just going by what's in the court record. And in the press conference, the prosecutor said, yeah, he did have psychological testing, primarily from the defense. And there's no evidence that he was, that we we agreed to this plea deal because of anything in the psychological testing. But the psychological testing showed that he's on the autism spectrum. He has obsessive compulsive disorder, has a neurological disorder. And in terms of the obsessive compulsive disorder, just looking at the recent documents that were released, there were police reports. It kind of confirmed that, because one of his cellmates, or not cellmate, but a person in jail who was next to Bryan Kohberger. I think they were in individual cells, but they were right next to each other or close to each other. I'm not sure, but that person who was jailed along with Kohberger said that the strange behavior bothered him, that he was always washing his hands, washing his hands constantly and taking long showers, and that annoyed him, meaning the other prisoner. So I believe he does have obsessive compulsive disorder, but that in and of itself, I mean, the fact that he's on the autism spectrum and the fact that he has OCD and some motor coordination disorder doesn't preclude that he didn't do it or he couldn't have done it. I mean, he did it. Obviously, he confessed. I mean, he pled guilty. So anyway, I have a different view on whether he's a psychopath or not. I think he snapped at some point and lost touch, just had some kind of break. And obsessive compulsive disorder is an anxiety disorder, and people usually take medication for it. And I don't know if he was medicated or not, but if he was consuming drugs that were not prescribed to him, it could have caused him to freak out. I don't know. But I don't have the same opinion that a lot of these people have on the media or social media, that he's a psychopath. He has absolutely no feelings. What he has is the stone cold look. It's actually probably neurological. It's part of the autism spectrum where they have a flat look, flat affect. But, I don't know. He could be a psychopath as well. I don't know, but that's just my opinion. So then it came time for Bryan Kohberger to see if he was going to give a statement. And I was hoping he would give a statement, anything other than, the yes, no, guilty, guilty. I wanted to hear from him. I mean, I think the families wanted to hear from him too. Like, give us something or apologize or something. And he just said, I respectfully decline, when the judge asked him if he wanted to give a statement. But it seems like the judge knew he wasn't going to give a statement, because he said, I take it you're not going to give a statement. So then Bryan Kohberger said, I respectfully decline to give a statement, or whatever. So in any event, during this proceeding, Mrs. Gonsalves, I learned later, received a horrifying text from someone who I think could be some kind of content creator, because of the choice of words that were used in the text, or how it was typed, because they used the term RAPE, and for the A they put a 4. And that's what YouTubers do usually. They don't spell it all out, but it was a horrifying text. Horrifying. I don't even know how. I can't even go there. It was just horrifying. This is such a strange case. Very, very strange to me. And the other thing I found strange was, the victims made their victim witness impact statements, and there was clapping. And I mean, in a court, that's not what happens. But this is an unusual case, and that was unusual, because normally the court says at the outset there will be no outbursts, there will be no clapping, there will be no nothing. I mean, you have to keep order in the court, and even people who are sobbing uncontrollably, they're escorted out. And but not always. I guess not always in victim witness impact statements. They're not always escorted out, but usually they are. And to be honest, I've only been in a couple because my clients were giving victim impact statements, and they had a civil case arising out of a criminal case. So I'm limited in what I know. But normally I think that kind of thing isn't allowed, the clapping. But the judge allowed it, and that was kind of strange because it was like, whoa, this is happening in a court. But this is a strange case, and anyway, it was a strange case. So the next thing I want to address is the judge's remarks to Bryan Kohberger. And, he talked about uh, the why of the crime. And he said that it doesn't, even if he were to tell us why, it would probably be a lie. Oh, that rhymed. Anyway, that it would probably be a lie. And he made that assumption, and he said, this is the end of Mr. Kohberger's 15 minutes of fame. And he also said nobody should stoop so low as to get Bryan Kohberger's story for clicks and profits for Bryan Kohberger, something to that effect. And that people should study Bryan Kohberger away from the limelight. And he had nothing positive to say about Bryan Kohberger, and mentioned some other judge who said that when sentencing a person for unaliving people, said the only redeeming quality was the handwriting. And he said, I can't even say that. I have nothing positive to say about Bryan Kohberger. And so I found that strange, only because I guess, once he's pled guilty, the bias there's no more neutrality with a judge. So I get that. But, I thought, and this is just my opinion, that he would say something like, you were getting a PhD. You were on the road to do something good for your life. You were going to do good for society. You had that opportunity. And yet, because of your choices, you chose to unalive the 4 victims who had their life ahead of them. You basically brought them down to where they can't have that anymore, and neither can you, something to that effect. So I found his comments kind of strange, because he was talking to him as if he was a sociopath or psychopath who wanted attention and lies and this and that, when the judge himself made a ruling on the motions in limine that Bryan Kohberger was not to be called a psychopath because there was no evidence that he was a psychopath. In other words, the evidence in the record was that he's on the autism spectrum. He had OCD and some motor coordination disorder. And anyway, I thought that was strange. But after after Bryan Kohberger pled guilty and he's sentencing him, the neutrality goes away. He can say what he wants to the defendant. And then the other strange thing was that he talked about the fines and what he would be liable to the families for. And he said $50,000 fine, which my understanding is that's paid to the court, and a $5,000 fine for the families. I thought that was strange. I mean, maybe because I don't practice criminal law, but $5,000 for the families? Like, I'm sure the families could file a wrongful death suit against Bryan Kohberger and ask for more. I mean, I hope that's not limiting. I don't think it is, but I don't know. He said something about converting it into a civil judgment, but that was strange to me, and probably because I didn't understand it. And then the other strange thing was he brought up the fact that even though you pled to guilty and no appeal, you can still appeal. And I'm sure that was very confusing for a lot of people. I mean, it was for me, but I think I understand it. Bryan Kohberger can appeal, but he has very limited ability to appeal. very limited. And as a practical matter, just because he pled guilty with no appeals doesn't mean that he can't file a notice of appeal. It doesn't mean that he can't file an opening brief for an appeal. It just, what matters is whether it's going to be heard. And the Court of Appeal could reject it because he pled guilty with no appeal. However, the judge made a comment that if you appeal, that violates the plea agreement. And I'm not sure what that means exactly. Does that mean that if he violates a plea agreement, then he goes to trial? I'm not sure what that meant. So I'll leave that there. But what I did want to do is I wanted to share a video of a judge talking about this case. And I'm just going to let it play here for a second.
So we wanted to know whether the murderer would speak. So the judge quickly told him he had that right. His attorneys glossed over that and quickly indicated that he would not take that opportunity. As we touched on before, he might be a person without empathy, and for him to do so perhaps would have been counterproductive. Maybe he feels no remorse. So how can he express it?
So they really can't make him explain himself or say anything. So that's the first thing. And then let me play this again.
There was a public suggestion, very public earlier, that he could be required to give answers, to speak. That's just not legally accurate.
Yes, all he said was, I respectfully decline, when asked if he had anything to say.
Right.
Prior to that, we've only heard him say the word guilty 5 different times.
That's right.
We heard from, in this hearing, from the family of Madison Mogen. We heard from the Gonzalez family, Kernodle family as well, and the 2 surviving roommates who were in the house at the time. And what a poignant picture of the 6 of them the day before these murders happened. When the judge talked about the fact that Kohberger has waived his right to appeal as part of this plea agreement, but he can file a motion to appeal. Explain that. What does that mean?
I think that's just a technicality indicating that he has that right. I think that would be, if he did that, it would be confined to solely challenge the entry of the guilty plea. Mm-hmm. Which is why the judge was so thorough at that time, going through the colloquy with the defendant, that this was out of his own free will, he wasn't coerced, etc.
The one question that a lot of people had is, can he profit from this, right? I mean, he got life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will go through all these appeals, but he could still technically profit from this, write a book.
And so here is where the judge is going to talk about Bryan Kohberger profiting from his story. And I thought this was interesting. So let me...
His story, the judge obviously addressed that, but he didn't prohibit him from doing so. Did that surprise you? And can the judge do that?
That was disappointing. And I was critical of that when I was here last at the guilty plea, because I believe the prosecuting attorney has the authority to require that as part of the plea bargain. The contract that is made at that time, that's a condition that could have been agreed to. So that begs the question whether on his own accord, the judge had the authority today to simply impose that as a condition of the sentence, as a term of the sentence, that he cannot profit in any way from his story, from the crimes. Or if he is compensated in any way, those funds would be earmarked for a victims organization or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I was listening. I was hoping that would be the case. I don't know why it's not. I know it.
So that was interesting to me, hearing this judge talk about that. And I know there's son of Sam laws that prohibit that. And I believe Idaho has that. So I was a little confused, but I was listening to this judge and I thought I'd share this video with you guys.
That passes constitutional muster in the state of Washington. I don't know if there's a legal prohibition in Idaho. I doubt it. So I think that was a oversight, particularly because the judge referenced that as an issue. So I'm not sure why that wasn't anticipated.
So in any event, anyway, those are my thoughts on the sentencing hearing for Bryan Kohberger. It was really strange to me. The other thing I wanted to talk about was there was a paper in front of Bryan Kohberger that had like a black heart, and I didn't pay attention to it at first because I thought maybe that was something that he was going to read, like it was like a copy of a card that he was going to read. That's initially what I thought. But as the time went on, after the Gonsalves family gave their statements, they took a break and then they came back. And I'm just wondering if Bryan Kohberger changed his mind to give a statement, or he just wasn't planning on it, but that doesn't matter. I started focusing on that. I mean, I really was focusing on that paper. And throughout the hearing, I saw myself focusing on that paper. And I'm just wondering if that was something that they did for Bryan Kohberger so he could focus on it and not react. But maybe it was for the viewers to get distracted and look at that paper so that they wouldn't look at Bryan Kohberger's expression, which was expressionless. So I don't know. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think.